Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV, co-sponsored by AMF Capital, the Baljanik Law Firm, the Butler Exchange Group, and the construction firm J.R. Johnson.
Welcome back to HFO-TV. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have with us Mingus Maps, who's running for City Council against Chloe Udaly. The election is this November. So again, I want to thank Mingus for getting together with us before. We've talked to him a number of times. Mingus, thank you. Let's jump right into kind of what's going on in your world now that we're less than 60 days from the election.
It's been going great. And we have volunteers and labor that are going to be out knocking on doors for us and text banking for us and making phone calls for us. So, I have every, I expect to win. I'm not taking it for granted, but I'm also a political scientist by training and have a PhD in this stuff. And this is what it looks like. This is what winning campaigns look like,
Right.
And that's my design.
Well, that's good. No, that's very good. What's your feeling with City Council? I mean, with where you think it's going to end up, or have you kind of thought about that at all, or?
Yeah, well, let's see. We have 2 empty seats left.
Right.
We have my race, and then we have the mayor's race. Frankly, I'm going to win my race. I think if there's any news here, I think it's probably that the mayor's race is probably tighter than people anticipate. Sarah has, to her credit, she's run a technically solid campaign.
And that's changed in the last 90 days. That's changed the last 120 days.
But Wheeler is also, I think, has changed his tactics in the last probably 2 weeks or so too. He said, I'd loved his old campaign manager, but he has a new team there, and you can tell he has a new voice out there. He's being more aggressive, more responsive. But what a crazy time to be running for mayor. You literally, he's being denounced by the president on Twitter, every other day. Apparently, Portland is now an anarchist community, and it's you guys are you're in an industry that's deeply impacted by the current moment. And, you look at what's happening downtown with commercial spaces and houselessness. So it's a real hard time to be an elected official. So we'll see who wins there. And I'm happy and look forward to working with either one of them. And then I'm excited about the rest of council. Dan is great. It's going to be a breath of fresh air. We got to know each other a lot over the course of the primary. Frankly, volunteers and staff have joined our campaign for the general election. So we have very tight relationships there.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, Dan, because it was a seat that came up because of Nick Fish passing, has already been sworn in and has actually been active in council since August. Oh,
I think he just got sworn in like literally last week.
So it's got it. Okay.
His second city council session. So he's getting his feet on the ground, and but it's going to be great to have that. I think one of the we've been struggling is because we've had an understaffed city council. Dan's on board. I look forward. Carmen has had this amazing. She did it exactly perfectly, where she managed to just win right out in May, but she's still waiting to get sworn in, and that'll happen when I'm sworn in. So that's probably January 3rd or something. So it'll be great to have her on there. I like Carmen a lot. Again, someone I got to know real well on the primary. On the primary trail, and then we have Joanne Hardesty, who amazingly is the senior member of City Council after being on there for I think less than 2 years at this point. But Joanne's a pro, and I talk to her and her staff quite often around a range of issues. Everything from policing, as you can imagine, to housing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about now that kind of what are some of the contrasts with like Chloe's policies? And again, our audience is particularly multifamily providers of housing, property owners. Some of the differences on housing policies, and we'll kind of get into some of the other ones, but specifically with some of the things that Udaly's office has kind of pushed through or has gotten through, and kind of what she's campaigning on, and kind of where your take is on that.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest difference between Udaly and myself is that you'll have a partner and a colleague when I'm on city council. I think one of Udaley's, one of the trademarks of her style of leadership, especially on housing, has been to have a very one-sided conversation.
Right.
I think that's resulted in housing policies that are often out of balance. Certainly, it has poisoned the politics of trying to reform our housing market. So I want to change that. I know, like, there is a core problem that has not been, we haven't figured out here in Portland, and frankly, I don't know if anyone's figured out, which is, how do we bring more affordable housing online? Because in Portland, by the time you buy the land and you buy the sort of materials and you buy the labor and you pay for the permits, we are no longer in the realm of affordable housing.
Right.
And I think we need to work together to figure out how to resolve that. And, I do have parameters here. I do support labor, and I want people who build our houses to be able to afford the houses that they sort of build. But at the same time, there are, I think, ways in which we can do better. When I'm on council, one of the things I want to do is get the city out of the way of bringing down housing prices. So I want to really take a look at the fees that we charge for new developments. I want to speed up the inspections process. I know I can't tell you how many people who are in your line of work who tell me, I want to build or bring more affordable housing to Portland, but it would take me a year, 2 years to get these plans approved by the city. And I could just go across the county line and, build it in Vancouver or someplace else in half the time and like much less cost. So I think we need to look at that. And permitting, to take a look at the permitting process too, if I haven't mentioned that, speed up the permitting process, speed up the inspection process and reduce those fees, and then bring everyone into the table. Because, the problem that we face in Portland is legitimately a hard problem. And at the end of the day, this does kind of have to fit into a spreadsheet. And I'm a political scientist by training. I live and die by spreadsheets. I realize this, if we're going to have housing, especially if we're going to bring 29,000 units of new affordable housing online, this has to make economic sense. And in order for it to pencil out, I think that we need to talk to, the builders, the people who manage apartments, the people who want to live in apartments, and figure out a way that to make the system work better. And I think it's possible for this to work better for everybody.
So it's your idea to bring more of the shareholders in or people involved and kind of get everybody's, yeah.
I mean, it's one of the things that I really find in Portland is that our politics really feel divided and divisive. But if you actually listen to what different people are saying, the distance between what people want is fairly narrow. I mean, not always, but I think often there's much more room. I think there's much more room for compromise and innovation than people think, partly because we have, for the last 4 years, we've been in a kind of politics and a kind of policy making, which kind of divides the world into enemies and friends. And if you're on the enemy side, you don't get to be part of the discussion. But, I don't know how you build more affordable housing. And if you don't talk to people who build housing.
Right.
It doesn't work.
So then I know another thing that's come up is there's been the foreclosure moratorium, which has been extended. There's the eviction moratorium, which I think is coming up at the end of this month. And then we'll see CDC kind of did a national one, but it's a little bit different. I know one of the big things for people locally here is the CDC one. There's somewhere the tenant has to, show what's happened or why they need that. We don't have that here. And then I know Wheeler just came through with Portland's got a relocation fee. If you raise rents over a certain threshold, now they're saying if it's, you just raise rents period, there's a relocation fee. Not that I think a lot of people are planning on raising rents, but kind of wanted to get what your thought is on some of those policies and how do you see that? I know it's a little strange kind of in the whirlwind with COVID, but.
Sure. At first, I think it's important to recognize that this is just a remarkable once in a century moment. I got an 11-year-old upstairs and a 10-year-old downstairs. They haven't been in the classroom since March.
Right.
And here you and I are having this conversation through Zoom. This is a challenging moment, and it will at some point pass. One of the things we're trying to do is try to figure out how we get from here to there. I have a couple of priorities. and my kind of top priorities are to make sure that people don't lose their housing because of this crisis, and people don't lose their property because of this crisis. So I care about renters, and I also care about landlords and the folks who provide housing. And I really think of housing as being fundamentally a service. My strategy for serving both communities is to push the city to put every relief dollar that we can possibly find from the state and federal and even regional level into emergency rental assistance, so we can keep people with a roof over their heads, and we can keep all these buildings out of foreclosure. So that's my basic strategy there.
Okay.
And,
So doing a $500 gift card probably is not going to suffice as rental housing. Yeah.
Okay. But I know it's tough, but my goal is for all of us to get through this moment, and both renters and the people who provide housing. So I want to make sure that folks have a cash flow and people have a roof over their heads. And I think it's going to be tough, but that's when we prioritize what our relief dollars are going to be spent on. That's what I want to spend them on.
Yeah, and I think some of the frustration has been the state has received some dollars, and there's been some dollars put out, but is it trickling to the needed people? Is there too much bureaucracy and levels on it, and is it getting to the tenant, so to speak, then who can pay their bills and do what they need to do? But there just seems to always be so many layers, and I think that's been a lot of the frustration.
Yep, and I hear you, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of I like the emergency rental assistance approach. It's the it's one of the more streamlined approaches to actually providing direct aid to people, and those dollars are going to kind of flow because people are going to choose their housing, probably choose the housing first. That's going to keep them safe and sound, and it'll keep our economy going a little bit. And hopefully, we only have about another 6 or 8 months of this.
Right.
But.
And then I know the city just passed the residential infill program. You have some thoughts on that, or have you had a chance to kind of dig into that?
Yeah, I looked into RIP. One of my concerns with RIP is that we might have, in fact, even the city's analyses of it suggest that there's going to be some displacement, especially of low-income folks from that. When I'm on council, one of the things I want to do is focus on that, try to see if we can figure out ways to deal with or help people who are likely to be displaced from that. And then at the same time, I think there's some opportunities here. I did have some concerns about preserving the character of neighborhoods, making sure that we build. If you want to place me in terms of the policy-making space around housing, I definitely kind of a smart growth guy. So I like the idea of building densely along commercial corridors that have transportation and whatnot. And I'm hoping that some of that will happen organically, given the marketplace. But my main concern now is to make sure that the RIP that we have actually works effectively for everybody. And the two pieces of it that I really care about now is make sure it's equitable. Let's not displace people, and then let's figure out ways to make it really affordable. So I'll be reaching out to some community development corporations to see if we can make this work for them, and just kind of regular private sector developers. One of the things that I think, and in fact I know this is true, is that if one of our goals is to make housing affordable, supply really matters, and so RIP is going to help us with that. I'm excited about that, and and so let's finally have a housing market that works. And I'll be a partner as we try to sort that out.
And I know I saw the city just came out with kind of a report on their study on the inclusionary zoning. What has happened. Which again, we've looked at it, and we've seen this a few times with some of the things that have come out. With you being new coming on the council, and we've talked before about your kind of your political background and studies. How do you get, which seems from afar, the council where they're making decisions based on, I don't want to say the numbers. I mean, they don't add up. I mean, you're looking at it going, where did you get this? We're looking at it now from a research standpoint, going, wait, the numbers you're showing do not coincide with what's out there. Is that, I don't want to say it's indicative of what we've seen policy making wise, but how do you kind of change that mindset from somebody new coming into the council?
Well, sure. Partly one of the reasons why I ran for council is to elevate the discussion, both in terms of the the quality of the debate, and also just using evidence. One of the things I'm just horrified at is what passes for evidence in City Hall. It's not evidence. It's, at best it's cherry picking, and sometimes it's even bad cherry picking. And I know there's a lot of controversy on both sides around inclusionary zoning. I'd like to figure out a way to make this work. I recognize in order for this to work, it kind of actually has to fit into a spreadsheet. So, I'll be working with your community, and I'll be working with the affordable housing community to figure out how to make, how to bring more affordable housing.
Right.
And if that means inclusionary zoning, let's do that. And if it means like some new innovation, let's like lead into that. But I think we all know and agree where we want to go. The question is how we get there. I tell you one way that you don't get there. You don't get there by just ignoring evidence and facts and spreadsheets. I don't think that you can. And I've seen it. You've all seen it.
Oh yeah, no, I think even if we don't agree on the thing, but it's when it's using, like you said, cherry picking at its best. And then really gets frustrated when you see things come out and they're saying, well, hey, here's success or whatever it may be, but you're like, wait, they're not and it's hard to get. It really makes having that discussion back and forth more difficult when there's a kind of a disconnect. I don't want to say disconnect to reality, but a disconnect to what the effects of policy have been. So
sure. And one of the things I really like about the housing space in terms of policy questions is that it really is a market. I think a lot of things that you deal with in government are in the government space, partly because they don't kind of translate into the private sector.
Right.
But it's pretty fun to actually, I think about how we go about, making this particular exchange work. And we have to make it work, right? People have to move someplace. And I know we can do it. We've reinvented the city, and we've reinvented housing in Portland many times over the past century, and we will do it again.
Now, is it coming in, and again, for people that don't know, on the city council, we have kind of an odd setup with how our governments, and we've talked about this before. I think the last time we talked about change, do you think there's momentum to change the structure of Portland City's government in terms of the city commissioners all elected, by the whole area? There's not a mayor that's in power. You guys get bureaus. You think that's got momentum to happen in 2021, or is it going to be too much of dealing with kind of the landscape we have now?
I do think there is momentum for this to happen. This is actually one of the things I campaign on and have been talking about every day for more than a year. I think if you have intersected with City Hall at all, or even if you just live in Portland, you have a sense that there's something wrong. And if you've interacted with City Hall, you probably have an even deeper sense of that there's something wrong. And if you know anything about the commission form of government, it kind of suddenly makes sense that, the problem here is that, Portland doesn't really have, a lot of people think we have one mayor and 4 members of city council. We got 5 different mayors, each with their own fiefdom. We got a mayor for the police department. We got a mayor for the housing department. We got a mayor for the fire department, and if we have any problem that is complex and requires the housing bureau to talk to the police department and the mental health department, which might be, homelessness is a classic example of that, where if you want to solve homelessness, you got to give someone, part of the solution is giving someone a house, but part of it is
it's not going to be a one bureau type solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just literally cannot do that. And I can't tell you how often this issue comes up when you try to solve real problems in the world, especially around homelessness, which is how I probably spend 20% of my day at this point. To circle back to it, the problem is real. I think Portlanders get that the problem is real. I've talked to everyone on city council about this problem, and frankly, let's say we need 3 votes to get some of this done, and there are 3 votes for that there. And there's a process for changing our commission form of government. That's the city charter charter review process. That's actually kicking off. We'll have a charter review committee up by the end of the year, and I hope it's those folks are going to be charged with putting forth proposals that ultimately are going to go to the ballot.
So the charter has to get changed at the ballot, right? It can't be a city council. The charter will.
Got it.
Correct. But frankly, so the process right now is that we hope the Charter Review Committee will push that forward. And frankly, if they don't push it forward, members of City Council can put stuff on the ballot too, and I will.
Got it. Okay.
So if we don't get it done this year, one of the things you'll see from me is a proposal to change our form of government. It'll be on the ballot in 2 years, or probably in 2 years.
I think we've had a lot of people ask us about, in terms of the reason why the protests start for, systematic racism and all that. It seems as almost that message has been hijacked by some of the destruction. And, how do we get that not separated, but get, it would be and deal with, because that I think is a different, so it just doesn't seem there's been a lot of direction on that from our city council.
And this is where leadership and experience, I think, really matters. A thing which is just true is that the breaking a window or throwing a bottle at a cop does not, liberate my family. It does not make me safer. Indeed, it does the opposite of that. Violence begets violence, and that, if you throw a bottle downtown on a Saturday night, it's actually going to hit me on a Wednesday afternoon 3 miles away, when someone who's angry or somehow has learned that the way you deal with your political disappointment is to kind of throw a punch. And I hate to say it, but this is that's not a hypothetical thing. As our racial politics and politics in this town get more divisive and more tense, frankly, that kind of blowback against people of color becomes more common.
Right.
So we really are now in a vicious cycle, and we have to end it. And I'm calling on every Portlander and every institution in town to give peace a chance, because we're not going to be able to punch our way out of this.
But what point do you think that leaders will start looking within? It's not even like a singular group that's down there protesting, to say, look, we're down here protesting for and want to bring awareness to the actions that you're doing next to me is just like you said. You do this on Saturday, I might feel the effects of this on Wednesday all the way through. At some point that because again, I agree with you. I think there's been a lack of leadership from council in terms of giving direction. It's almost like they're afraid to offend anything, and so they don't say. And so, but at some point, you'd hope there'd be some internal leadership, maybe with some groups saying, "Hey, wait, we got to get back on point of what the issue is," and we're losing that point. And that's, I think as you brought up some of the, now that it's national news, then it gets completely politicized, and that doesn't, so.
And so part of it is leadership, part of it is courage. A thing that we never like to do in Portland is tell people what to do, or even disagree in particular.
At least not to tell them in their face.
Right, exactly. And this is part of our coming to terms with this problem, is part of Portland's maturation. And I think one of Portland's challenges right now is that we're sort of in our awkward adolescence at a whole bunch of different levels, becoming more sophisticated and more straightforward around issues of race, is part of becoming a grown-up city. I'm part of that discussion. It doesn't mean I have a unique experience here. It doesn't negate anyone else's experience, and it doesn't mean that my experience is necessarily more important than other people's experience. Although I do think that I am, frankly, just in a unique position to talk to Portlanders about what it's like to be an African American in the city, what helps, what doesn't help, and what I think sometimes I think there are some fundamental misunderstandings. Let's take the police abolition and whatnot. I'm not an abolitionist in terms of police. I do think that we need to do some fundamental reforms. But I'll also tell you, when you break a public safety system, the people who get hurt first are people who look like me and people who are, much more economically deprived than I am. So if our concern is justice and fairness and good public service, we got to kind of move in a different direction than what we're doing now. And I do think that it's not rocket science. I think people just want a public safety system that honors people's humanity, that's non-discriminatory. Frankly, I do think that when people dial 911, and unfortunately, probably all of us at some point will have to dial 911, we want someone to respond
In an appropriate manner.
Yes, and and it's there. I don't know how closely people on this call follow the ins and outs of where our police department is, but there are sometimes when you call 911 in Portland, you don't get a response, or it comes 17 minutes too late.
Well, I will say, in our discussions, and this is again why we're talking again, I think, again, I always say, I think changing the makeup and having, as you mentioned, Portland's kind of like it feels like in their adolescent years, having some adults in the room. And I think, discussions with you about, you looking at analytics and looking at bringing stakeholders in and having discussions, when you're just, everything's, one side and there's no discussion back and forth, I just don't think good policy comes out. So I'm, very hopeful that you can get in and bring some of that, because I do think there needs to be more adults in the room in terms of leadership in Portland, and the ones that are there, sometimes they get drowned out by, for whatever reason. So the more we get, I think hopefully it'll rise to the top. So.
And I think so too. And Portland used to be really good at doing public policy and urban development. That's kind of why I grew up in Portland.
Yes.
And kind of seeing the city evolve and seeing the people who helped it grow is one of the reasons why I've kind of lived the life that I have. You just gotta, and I'm also a little bit of an historian, and it's just true that the past 4 years in our country and in our city have just been unique. This is not how we normally do things. Right. This is not normal. It's just literally not normal. Usually, speaking of analytics, things regress to the mean, and hopefully we'll get back to a normal politics. And if we don't get back to a normal politics, one of my fears is what happens to downtown if we continue to do this for another, let's say, till March. We might. I'm concerned that we could become, kind of Detroit.
At some point, once people move out, it's hard to move them back. And there's going to be that period, and that's what I'm afraid of too, is that you're now getting, COVID was one thing with businesses, just not able to be in the office, and now you've got, that going on. You've got, now people not going back downtown. It's just, it's not a good cycle to be in.
Yeah, and then you have to, even if you want to come downtown, you have to deal with Portland, and one of the things that I think has made Portland special is that it's been a great and frankly kind of easy place to live and a great place to kind of start a business. And I'm not sure that it's still a great place to live, and it's become a challenging place to, And
in our world, with like I said, with property owners, it's a very challenging place to be a housing provider, and that's again where we're, I think there's a lot of the discussion of. We're providing a service, we're providing housing, but every step of the way, it's just another brick in the wall or another. And so that's been again, not to say we may not agree on everything, but at least I think there needs to be a conversation back and forth. And that's kind of the hope as we get a change in city council, that we get more adults in the room, some people with experience, or at least the level of, how to work together. And, politics is about compromise. It's not about getting my way and screw everybody else. So,
and also I'd point out that I think we want the same things. Everyone wants more affordable housing, and we're not going to be able to figure that out unless we, work together, figure out how we can, bring, units online that cost less than $450,000 a door, or even $250,000 a door. Right. We just can't. That's not affordable right now. But I know part of the problem are the policies that have come out of City Hall. Part of them are, a virus and other things that are a little bit beyond our control. But we're going to need the whole team suited up and on deck in order to move beyond this moment.
Well, I know you're really busy. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us today. And if people want to find out more about your campaign, they can go to the website listed below. And good luck. And thank you. Get your ballots in the mail.
Good luck, everybody. Please stay healthy and well. I'm looking forward to our ongoing discussions about how we can bring Portland back online, and so I look forward to seeing you soon.
Perfect. Thanks. We'll see you next time on HFO-TV.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.